Hi, everyone. Welcome here. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Rachel Martins, and with me as always is Dr. Kinga Posniak. And the two of us together are your hosts for Luke's Legacy Family Research Rounds. And the way that this got started, short version, is that this was actually named in memory of my son, Luke, who was unfortunately passed away 2 years ago, but he was also somebody who very much felt like having a seat at the table was just a natural thing that should happen. And in many ways it should. And so one of the things that we like to cultivate is that everybody in the room here is a colleague. And so there's an opportunity to chat, to ask questions, to offer suggestions. All of those things come as an opportunity within this session. I want to just briefly apologize. We're having some technical issues with Facebook tonight. So we will be posting the recording to the CAMH website as soon as we can get the file downloaded and everything like that. But tonight we are very excited to have Johanna Lake as well as Lee Steele, who are going to be talking about ACT, which is intervention for parents, and a very interesting one as well too. And I know I've talked to a lot of parents who've been very excited to learn more about this as well too, and some of them who couldn't make it but are very excited for the recording. So I'm going to give you both the microphone and allow you an opportunity to get the conversation started this evening. Before I do though, I have one last note, is that we do have an optional half an hour afterwards, after the hour. If you are somebody who likes to talk and just have an opportunity to just kind of process all of the things that you learned this evening, that space is for you to kind of just say a few things out loud. It is entirely optional. You do not have to attend, but it can be a great place to connect with people and get to know them at a deeper level and have some deeper conversations without the restraint of being within that 1 hour time frame. So if you're welcome to join, just stick around for the next little bit and we'll walk you through that. So Johanna and Lee, I give the mic to you officially. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We are so excited to be here, feeling very, very privileged to have this opportunity to speak with all of you, to share a bit about our passion for ACT and some of the work we've been doing. And yeah, just really, really grateful for this opportunity. And we will be here, I can speak for myself. I think Lee too can stay for the half an hour. So please feel free, anybody that wants to ask questions, but also just like Ray said, like, please chime in the chat, unmute yourself. Like, we definitely want this to be a conversation, an opportunity to talk about this. So we really welcome any and all discussion. And yeah, just really, really excited to be here. Lee, do you want to say hello? I guess I haven't really introduced myself. I'm Johanna. I'm a psychologist at CAMH. And I first got involved in ACT when I was a postdoctoral fellow, like probably 10 years ago, when I first took a workshop with Dr. Kenneth Fung, who's really been an inspiration and a real leader in this field. And yeah, ACT has affected my personal and professional life in so many ways. It's the most helpful therapy I've ever encountered. So very, very grateful to be here sharing this with you today. So Lee, I'm going to pass it over to you and then we can start sharing our slides.
Thanks, Johanna. So yes, my name is Lee Steele and I have the privilege of working with Dr. Lake at CAMH, and I know she immediately goes to the doctor part. She's just so great and down to earth. We both work with Dr. Johanna Lake, who runs the Azrieli Neurodevelopmental Centre at CAMH, who's embeds the caregiver and self-advocate voice in everything she does. It's just a natural thing that all research is informed by our lived experience. And ACT, I took my first ACT workshop in 2015, and it really, like, to say it was life-changing isn't an exaggeration. It has absolutely influenced the way that I every aspect of my life. So I'm so excited to share a bit more about ACT with you tonight. And as Rachel said, Ray said, it's about for families. It's an intervention for families, but it's also an intervention that we've recently incorporated for siblings whose loved one has a neurodevelopmental disability as well. So we really value the incredible insights that siblings bring to this intervention. So that's me.
Okay, so let me share my screen, make sure I do this all correctly. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see this. Please let me know if for some reason it doesn't come through. I'm just trying to put it into slideshow mode. There, okay. We're good to go. And Lee, when you're sharing, just let me know if you want me to take down the slides at any time. So yeah, so we're really excited to be here with you to talk about enhancing caregiver well-being, and this is sort of in reference to a really unique and special collaborative acceptance and commitment training ACT intervention. So tonight we're going to share a bit more about what is ACT. We're going to experience ACT, and then we're going to share a little bit about some of the research we've been doing in this area. But I wanted to start off tonight's presentation with a land acknowledgement, and to let you know that I'm joining you today from ancestral traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. In the colonial records, this land has been described as the council grounds of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and this preferred location allowed for camping for the hundreds of Mississaugas who traveled by canoe to conduct the governance of their nation. And engage in negotiations for treaty making and land transactions. The Mississaugas lived lightly on the lands they occupied and purposely moved about the landscape, harvesting resources as they became available. And as an uninvited guest on this land, I have the pleasure of living, working, and playing on this beautiful territory. And I'm thankful for the Mississauga people who have cared for and who continue to care for these lands. But I also recognize that people tonight are joining from different places across Canada, from near and far, and I want to acknowledge the elders, the caretakers, and the owners of those territories from where you may be joining. So we thought we would start tonight a little bit with an obvious question, I'm sure, to many of you. Why do caregivers of people with neurodevelopmental disabilities need support? And you likely know the answer to this, but we know that caregivers of people with neurodevelopmental disabilities experience higher rates of mental health issues like depression and anxiety, and that's across the lifespan. So caregivers of children, caregivers of adolescents, caregivers of adults. But despite this, there are really very few evidence-based interventions that actually address or sort of target their own well-being. We also know that you are much better able to support your loved one, your family member, whether that's your child or your sibling, when you're doing well. And that's kind of what that picture in the corner is, the cup. It's really hard to pour from an empty cup. So it's really hard to support somebody else in your life when you're not doing well. And then the last point on the slide, I think is, again, probably an obvious point, but we know this from the literature as well, that family-based interventions not only benefit the caregiver, but by extension, the entire family. So I think there are lots of really, really good reasons why caregivers need support. And why, I think another maybe obvious, but probably less often that we see, why should interventions involve caregivers in their design and delivery? And this is particularly for interventions that are being delivered to other caregivers. So there's lots of really good reasons on this slide. And sadly, I think a lot of evidence-based interventions for caregivers fail to include caregivers in their design and delivery. And I think this often happens, particularly in like the research world, where these interventions are developed, with experts, and they're designed for people, but not with the people that they're designed for. And it's a really, really big gap. And sadly, it happens all too often. And I think there's a lot of research from the disability field highlighting the value of peer-to-peer support including the really, really important role that caregivers can play as peer mentors, enhancing the success of evidence-based interventions for other caregivers. And I think another really important point is that peer support positively impacts caregivers' level of psychological distress and coping. It can reduce feelings of isolation, but it can also provide really important opportunities for growth, connection, and learning. And I think we'll speak to this in a little bit, but particularly in the context of an ACT intervention, having caregivers as leaders and facilitators, it develops like an instant trust among those caregiver workshop participants. They sort of have a language that they sort of speak that and adds so much credibility to the intervention. Caregivers can help ensure, that the content of the workshop, of the exercises is really meaningful and relevant. And I think they can speak to having gone through this, and that this is something that can be really helpful and doable. So it's really, really an important part of, I think, designing these kinds of interventions. And then the last point on that slide there around building capacity and sustainability, as probably a lot of us know, there are often really, really long wait lists for interventions for our loved ones, but also for us as caregivers. So I think another really great reason why we should be involving caregivers in the design and delivery of these interventions is that it really builds capacity to continue offering these interventions. Training caregivers to co-facilitate adds and builds to the group of facilitators who are now trained and available to deliver the intervention, which ultimately means that we can offer more of these workshops to more families in different regions across the country and over the long term. And we're starting to see that with our team. What started off as a very small group has now really expanded. So I think it's a really exciting and important point. And now I'm going to turn it over to you, Lee.
Thanks, Johanna. I was so excited to introduce the work of ACT that I forgot to tell everyone that I'm a caregiver. My son, I'm the parent of 2 adult children, and my oldest son, Eric, is actually, I was just telling Ray that he's moving into his own place on June 1st. So it's like this huge transition for us, and really, really exciting. And he's going to be living directly below me in this co-op that we live in. So it's true interdependence, where I can continue to help him learn the skills he needs to live, more and more independently. And he's helping me as I age, because he's really great at going and getting groceries and cat food and all those things, especially in the winter when it's a big job for me now. He just goes out and does those things. So it's really exciting time. And so I just wanted to introduce myself that way. I realized I totally didn't say the real main reason I'm here, which is that I'm a caregiver. So ACT, what is ACT? ACT is, like Johanna said, is an evidence-based intervention, and it's based on behavior and mindfulness principles. And the aim of ACT is to help us to create a rich and full, meaningful life, as it says, while accepting the pain that inevitably life brings. And this is especially powerful for us when a situation can't be changed or fixed. Like, is often some things can be changed, but the things that caregivers face, it helps us bring acceptance to those feelings and those emotions and memories. So ACT gets its name from its core message, which is accept what is out of our personal control, and accepting our thoughts and our feelings, including those difficult ones like anxiety or guilt or pain, and by letting go of the struggle with them so they have less impact and influence on our lives. And then the choose part is it's helping us choose our directions in life by identifying and focusing on what really matters to us, what we call in ACT our values, and what we truly value in life, who and what is really important to us. And out of being clear about our values, we then take action. And that's to realize our valued life goals by making a commitment to change what can be changed and to live a meaningful and engaged life. So I just find that ACT was, when I came to my first ACT workshop, I was just like that cup in the first illustration. I was completely empty. And the idea of a workshop that was devoted to me, not on more skills development for my son, not on trying harder, but to actually make room for difficult thoughts and feelings, was just really, really different and helpful for me. And you can just imagine my delight when they asked if I would be interested in being one of the parents who would help to co-deliver and co-lead this intervention with other caregivers. I couldn't believe it, because I thought, otherwise, is this going to be one more really wonderful workshop I took, but then what will I do with it? So I've been involved with ACT ever since 2015, when I attended that first workshop myself. So I'm going to really quickly go over the next slide, Johanna, which is the 6 core processes of ACT. And the core processes, it looks, is it going ahead, Johanna? No. It's they're like facets of a diamond, and in the illustration, it kind of looks like, it looks complicated, but it actually isn't so complicated, in that they all overlap, they intersect, and they highlight with one another. So I'll just go over these 6 core processes. And I'm going to do so by showing you with hand gestures. And these hand gestures were developed and thought of by Dr. Kenneth Fung, who is, as Johanna said, our mentor. He's a psychiatrist at Toronto Western, and he's really, really been instrumental in creating most of the ACT activities. So these are the 6 core processes of ACT. And after you finally got that up there, Joanna, I'm just going to ask you to take it down for a minute, so that, and we'll just kind of work through these together. So the first one in ACT is called diffusion. But if you can like just do this with me, even sticking your hands, like really pressing them sort of tightly together and with some pressure. And that's kind of what our thoughts can be like. They can be really, sticky or really fused together. The range of emotions, sadness, anxiety, fear, feeling hopeless, overwhelmed, not knowing what to do. Think thoughts like I've completely failed, or I've blown it, or I'm not living up to my expectations, or I'm lousy at this. And these thoughts don't come like, they just come naturally. They just pop into our minds when we don't want them. They just come bubbling up. So what's it like just now to experience like a little separation, like feeling that sort of lack of pressure of like being fused with our thoughts, but just that little separation. And that's the first ACT process. It's called diffusion, of just becoming unstuck. And instead of, being stuck and fused with those difficult thoughts and memories and sensations, we actually just give them that little bit of breathing room, allowing space between our thoughts, noticing that we have a thought, but we don't have to be fused to it. And then it's not getting rid of my thoughts and feelings. It's actually learning how to separate from them just a little bit, even a little bit makes a difference. And then if I pivot my hands to being open, this is the second process of ACT. And this is the acceptance piece. So instead of fighting or struggling or debating, ignoring, I acknowledge that I'm having these challenging thoughts and feelings. And this is like a brave and open gesture, I think. And in ACT, we talk about, it's actually that pain is inevitable, but our suffering's increased when we resist those painful and difficult thoughts. So I really like the acceptance part of ACT, because for me anyway, I used to think, well, if I only just read one more book, or if I just try harder, or if I just try this therapy a little bit more and really apply myself to it. So this idea of just being open and accepting that life is always going to bring difficult thoughts and feelings and emotions and situations. And what's it like to just invite those difficulties just to come alongside me and say, yes, I'm making room for that, versus all the energy that it takes to try to avoid them or push them away. I really like this one metaphor we use, which is a beach ball. If you think about all the energy it takes to try to push a beach ball underwater, And inevitably it comes flying out in some kind of weird direction that you have no control over. That's kind of what feelings are like for me. I can try to push them down, and then they come flying out in a direction that's like, whoa, what was that all about? And it's, you know, I'm getting upset with my son today because I was actually nervous about tonight. And I'm like, I went sideways with him, like, and it was really because I was anxious and I'm worried about him moving out and all of that. I was pushing those feelings down instead of just making room for them. So that's the second sort of core process, is this idea of acceptance. And then I'm just going to talk about the third one. And these aren't linear in any way. I'm just talking about them this way. And that's contact with the present moment. So oftentimes I don't know about you, but I'm stuck in the past, ruminating, thinking about, oh, like today, why did I, flip out at Eric like that? Or if only I hadn't, and how's that going to impact the future? And I'm like either in the past with my regrets or thinking about those kinds of things, or I'm in the future worrying about something. So contact with the present moment is like it's illustrated by just being in the center of your palm, being right here, right now, in this moment, which we often talk about as mindfulness, right? Bring our attention to this moment with our breath, or bring our full attention to this moment. So that's the next core process of ACT is that idea of contact with the present moment. And I'm going to shift our hand again, and I'm making like a little cup and another hand, like your fist, inside the cup. And this is called contact. Itself is context. So sometimes we can get really caught up in the content of our lives, like a fresh cup of coffee, or sour milk, or crystal clear water. What would be in the cup? We can sometimes get fused with what the content is. But in ACT, we talk about that we're actually, that the content is constantly changing, and we're the container that holds that. And the content will constantly be changing. So, sometimes I can get caught in a certain role, like this is what a parent should be like, and I can get caught into that, and maybe I'm not living up to that full expectation, or something in my past, or maybe I've defined myself as, oh, I'm shy, so what the heck am I doing talking at Luke's legacy lecture, right? So I get caught in sort of the content, rather than being the cup that holds that this is constantly changing. Who I am in the past, when I might have defined myself as shy, maybe no longer applies. I've taken new risks, or maybe as a parent, I think I'm constantly evolving, or as a person, I'm constantly evolving. So that's the self as context, that I'm the cup that holds my experience, not the content itself. And then I'm going to be to pivoting again. And if you could imagine like putting your hands together really tightly, as if you don't even want water to slip through, not even a drop of water. And then look inside your hands. And if there was like little jewels in there, who and what is really important to you? Who would you have in there, and what would be really important to you? What are your values? This is the values part of ACT. So ask yourself, what's precious to me? What would I not want to slip away? And it's unique to each of us, right? What you would hold in your hands would be precious and unique to you. But they give our life meaning and direction. And then that brings us to the next process, which is if you link your fingers together in like a pinky swear, that knowing what's really truly important to you, those values, you take action towards those values. So that's like this, just saying that, being clear about my values, I'm going to take action to move in that direction, not be sort of pushed around by society's ideas of what values should be, or the disability community's ideas of what values should be, but actually, that are freely chosen actions towards our values. They're like a North Star. That's, I'm going to have obstacles, things are going to come up, but I'm going to move towards those values because that's truly what has meaning for me. So those are the 6 core processes of ACT. And as I said, they come in no particular order. They complement and build on one another. And they just help us to live a rich, full, and meaningful life by applying them into our own lives. Johanna, I'll pass it back to you for a moment.
Thanks, Lee. So Lee is also very, very modest in that she introduces herself as just a caregiver when she is a true ACT guru and a real leader herself. And I'm constantly learning from you, Lee, about ACT. So thank you for leading us through a bit of an overview of ACT, which we try to do tonight in a really brief way. But if you can imagine in an ACT workshop, we would spend a good chunk of time on each of those processes, engaging in kind of like an experiential exercise around them. So tonight we're really giving you like a highlights version, but I was excited to read in the chat that so many of you are sort of intrigued or learning about ACT. So happy to share more outside of today's session too. Okay, so let me go back to sharing my slides. Okay. Let me see if I can get this to go back. Okay, so those are the hand gestures that Lee just very beautifully showed us and demonstrated for us, and they were created by Dr. Kenneth Fung on the slide there. Okay, so what about our ACT intervention model? And I think it's really, really cool. And I think it's the heart of why it's been so successful is that it's co-developed and co-delivered by caregivers and clinicians working in partnership. This is the highlight of what I get to do working with caregivers and getting to do this work together. It's so incredibly meaningful, and it's enhanced any kind of clinical work I've done. So I have to say that this is an essential part of this model, and I think why it's been successful. I think there's, and I'll speak a bit more about this later on, but the experience and perspective that each group brings to informing how the intervention was developed. So like the content of the exercises, how things are shared and debriefed as a group, how they're delivered, and then actually delivering them together. Each group brings something that's so essential and important in that partnership. And we hear this not only from workshop participants, but as we'll share later, from the facilitators themselves. So I think that's really exciting, and I think it has relevance outside of ACT, which I think we'll speak to sort of at the end of tonight. So far, we've been delivering ACT workshops to just over 250, which is really exciting, caregivers of people with neurodevelopmental disabilities across Canada. In each and every one of these workshops, they're co-delivered by at least one caregiver and at least one clinician. And originally the workshops were delivered in person pre-COVID to about sort of 12 to 15 caregivers. And then since COVID, we've been able to adapt delivering the intervention virtually to about the same number of people. And we've had to adapt a few of the exercises for sort of a virtual context, but many of the exercises have remained the same. And then the timing of the workshops has changed a bit. In person, the workshop sort of happened in a more intense format. So there was like an evening and a full day workshop, followed by a final evening session a month later. And now that we're doing them virtually, we're doing them over the course of 4 or 5 weekly sessions for 2 hours each. And then we have a final session a month later. And it's been really wonderful to see how this has translated to a virtual context, and that it's actually worked really well virtually too. Our first workshop, and I think we're going to share a video about it in a minute, was delivered to female caregivers of autistic people. And that was just related to the funding that we had at the time through Women's Exchange. But since then, we've offered workshops to caregivers, and that might be mothers, fathers, grandparents, siblings, of family members with different kinds of neurodevelopmental disabilities. So as I was saying, sometimes it was specific to a group of caregivers of autistic people, but we've offered workshops to caregivers of people with FASD, intellectual disabilities, ADHD, and across the lifespan, so family members of children and adults. And I think, like we shared earlier, because the workshop is really about your own well-being as a caregiver, not so much about the diagnosis of your loved one. We've found a lot of success in groups that have involved mixed, different kinds of neurodevelopmental disabilities and among caregivers who have loved ones of different ages, which I think is really, really special about this workshop. We've trained about 50 caregivers and 57 clinicians to co-deliver ACT across 6 provinces, which I think has been really, really cool. And that's kind of the phase that we're at now in this model, is really seeing this amazing team of facilitators, some of you are on this call tonight, grow, and also, you know, now offering ACT to other caregivers across the country. So building that capacity and really seeing this expand from what was once a very small group to a really big expanding group of caregivers and clinicians. And our training process, I think, has also evolved. Like, it was in person, now it's virtual. And now we're also adding a coaching component, which Lee is a real expert and leader in, and we'll talk a little bit more about. I think another exciting piece is we've developed and published an ACT facilitator training manual. And this manual was a real labor of love, and we developed it, our team of caregivers and clinicians, together over the course of several years. And we recently added an addendum sort of to it for the virtual delivery. And it's something you can freely download from the CAMH website, or you can purchase a copy to be mailed to you. But I think an important part is that the manual itself isn't meant to be like you read the manual and you go deliver a workshop. It's meant to sort of be part of attending a training. And there's a real experiential part of that that's really, really critical, I think, to the success of the workshops. And then I think the final point on that slide, we've developed a community of practice website and meetings. We've been really fortunate to have someone on our team help us with creating a website, which is a really wonderful place where facilitators, caregivers, and clinicians who've trained in our program can come to the website. They can find really relevant ACT resources there, whether that's like books, podcasts, articles. It's a place we're constantly updating. And then there's also like a password protected section of the website where people upload their bios. So caregivers and clinicians who've trained in our program have their bios, their picture if they're comfortable, but a little blurb about them, when they trained, where they're coming from. And so I think it's a really great place where other facilitators can connect with people who have trained possibly in their region, or who are looking to deliver a workshop in their region. You can, you know, find another facilitator to deliver a workshop with. You can connect with someone around, you know, some peer practice. People advertise their workshops there. It's really like a very much an ACT kind of collaborative community where we can kind of come together and share. And it's been really, really exciting. And that's something we're hoping to continue to build on. And then we're offering our first community of practice meeting in June, which we're very excited about. So this is a recent thing. So outside of the website, there's been a desire from the facilitators who've trained in this program to meet virtually on an ongoing basis. So we're going to try to meet every 2 months. Invite anybody that's trained in the program to come, and you can drop in. You don't have to attend every 2 months, but you can come when you're able to. And we're hoping it to be a space where we can come together, we can support one another, we can share resources and ideas about ACT, we can problem solve and discuss, you know, tricky situations that might be coming up in our workshops. Kenneth will be there to help guide us with his ACT wisdom, but we can also share other things we're learning about ACT in the community, which I think is really exciting. And we're hoping that's going to be, like an ongoing thing where we can come together outside of the website virtually across Canada. Am I forgetting anything, Lee? Please feel free to chime in. And I also realize I'm not monitoring the chat super well. So if there's anything that's coming up in the chat, please let me know. Okay. I think we're going to share our video now, which I may have to stop sharing and then reshare my screen so that I can get it to play properly. Let me just see if it'll work from here, but I have a feeling I'm gonna have to share my screen again in one moment. So this is a video. So this goes back to one of our very first workshops where you'll see Lee was attending this workshop. And this was through funding that we had through Women's Exchange. So it was a workshop that was specifically for mothers of autistic people. And it was called Caring for the Caregiver Through ACT. So I'm going to see if I can share a different screen to make sure that this works. I'm really hoping the volume works. I'm going to put it in the chat in case for some reason it doesn't work. I don't know if this will work for somebody else, but let's try it. Okay. Can people still see my screen okay? No, okay. Oh no. Let me just try this. Okay, can people see this now? The only issue is whether or not the volume will work. I think this will be the one tricky thing, but we'll try it.
Joanna, there's sort of oh, it's okay now.
Can you hear it? You can't hear the sound? I had a feeling this would happen. This always happens when we do this for some reason. Let me just try one more thing to see if I can make it play.
Maybe while you're doing that, Joanna, I can just address, there's some points about there's ACT training for staff like that work in group homes and that sort of in the developmental sector. So, you know, if Ray and Kinga want the people that do those to ever attend Luke's Legacy, that would be very useful maybe, but if that's of interest at all. But our focus is care workshops for caregivers. And then there's also ACT workshops for developmental services staff and the frontline staff, like you were mentioning, and potentially, you know, group homes, that sort of thing, to actually have the staff, because the same principle applies, that if they are able to utilize ACT principles in their lives, then of course the well-being of the people that live in those group homes would be enhanced.
For surely, basically, I think like there was a question earlier up in the chat, and I think it pretty much envelops. I think people came in here 5 minutes before everything started and were like, how do I get this at where I am? So any information that you both could provide, I'd be happy to move that to people who may need to put that in the hands of people or to get trained themselves or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have an address we'll share with you, that if you're interested in learning more, that people can email that address, right, Joanna?
We definitely do. And yeah, and Dr. Kendra Thompson has kind of been leading some of the work around ACT for support workers, and finding really wonderful results from that. And that has been really helpful in that group. So certainly we could also share some, we could ask her for some information as well. It's a really great question. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this to work. I don't know, Kinga or Ray, if you're able to get it to play from your computers from that link. It's
okay, Joanna. We can go on.
Try.
I can give it a go. Yeah, or Kinga, go for it.
Okay.
You've got host duty, so yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. I don't know if the sound will work. It's like I can play the video and I can hear the sound, but you can't hear the sound. I'm sorry.
I know. Time I ever come across that is wearing earbuds. That doesn't translate, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't know.
Okay, let me try sharing my screen.
Thank you, Kinga.
All right, can you all see this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. I'm gonna turn up the volume. Is it playing?
Mm-hmm.
It's a mindfulness-based psychological intervention. It helps us increase our resilience to face difficult thoughts and feelings and emotions, while becoming more effective in our lives in being focused and leading a more value-driven life.
Relearn who you are and what you want out of your life, you know, the life you want to have versus the life you don't want to have, and then taking that time and that moment to slow down, reconnect with yourself, feel what it feels like to be you.
ACT is a reservoir of hope for me. It really holds a different way of viewing my thoughts and viewing my child and viewing myself.
You tend to focus all your energy on them and their well-being, and even members of the family when they come around. It's always about, how is the child? How is he doing? And you forget to pay attention to things that are going on with you.
And thinking about your child all the time, or if fear takes an upper hand, you lose your values, or you can get sidetracked off your values. I felt like a cup that was completely filled to the brim, and it only took one extra drop to sort of spill over.
When my health goes down, when I'm, emotionally not available for my kids or my family, everyone else is affected.
Let me hold it for you.
Oh, sure.
This has given me a very beautiful outlet to try other things to cope with the stress.
It's a very positive experience and provides hope. This group is very empowering to moms. So you end up feeling more in control of your life, and that makes you more effective in dealing with your family. It makes you a better caregiver.
The number one most important thing that has come out of this workshop for me is my awareness of my own health, and that this workshop has taught me to put my own health front and center and to be proactive in keeping myself mentally healthy, emotionally healthy, physically healthy.
It is kind of special to have groups where everyone are parents of children with autism. As soon as you find that out, you feel an instant kind of connection. There's almost a different language you would use.
I'm inspired by resilience of the parents and their openness, and it takes courage.
As a parent and as a facilitator, as much as I am teaching the knowledge I've learned or I've gained, I'm receiving it back from these women as well. And it's been a privilege to be able to facilitate and learn more, but also get back the strength and the courage and the empowerment that I get from each of them.
Yay, thank you, Kinga.
No problem.
So I hope that gives you a little bit of a brief sense of a bit about what the workshops are like from the participants themselves. And yeah, this was from one of our very first workshops. It was very cool to see you in there, Lee. And now you're like leading and facilitating and designing, and wow. Okay, so let me go back to sharing my slides. Okay. I'm cognizant of the time. We have so much we want to do in a short period of time. So I'm going to go sort of quickly through the next few slides. So how does ACT impact caregivers? And I know we saw a bit about that in the video. And these are results from sort of ongoing data collection where we've been collecting data since that first workshop. And now we have information from about 180 caregivers who've attended a workshop either in person or virtually. What we see is that there are differences in caregiver depression, stress, social isolation, and health. So we see improvements in all of those areas from before the workshop starts to after it ends, because we ask caregivers to complete an online survey that looks at some of these different things before, after, and then again 8 weeks later. And so we see those changes, those reductions maintained over time, which is really cool. And then we're also seeing improvements after people have attended a workshop in some of the ACT processes. So in things like psychological flexibility, cognitive fusion, and values consistent activities. And that's across multiple life domains. So family, parenting, relationships, self-care. And we're continuing to kind of refine our methodology and our data collection. We've added some new measures for workshop participants. So now we're looking at things like self-compassion, and we're looking at the impact of these workshops on other family members. So the relationships of the caregivers who attend the workshop with their loved ones and with their other family members. And now we'll speak a little bit, if we have time at the end, we're also looking at a bit more closely the experience again of the people facilitating the workshops themselves, so the caregivers and the clinicians, which I think is really, really exciting. Okay, I really didn't put this in slideshow mode, so let me do that now. Okay. And in the corner there are just a couple of papers that we're happy to share after if people are interested. Lee, this is you.
Thanks, Johanna. Yeah, we could really talk a lot about about ACT. We're so excited about it. I'm fused right now with the idea of how much I've changed since that video 7 years ago. So if you've got a piece of paper, if you don't have one, if you could just grab it. We're just going to do something really quickly experiential, like we do in a workshop. So first of all, before you have, like, just put the paper down. I'm going to ask you to pick it up in a second. I just want to make sure you have one. And so I just want you to imagine, like, looking out and say just into your room in front of you, you know, everything that really matters to you. Just imagine, like, looking around. Think about, like, deep in your heart, what makes your life meaningful or used to in the past, like all the people, places, activities you love, your favorite food, your favorite drinks, your music, books, movies, all the things you like to do, and all the people you care about and want to spend time with. And that's not all. As you're doing that visualization, just give you a second to kind of think about all of those things that are meaningful. There's all the problems and challenges you have to deal with in your life today as well. Challenges with your loved one, financial stresses, your health problems, other relationship difficulties you're having. And then out there also is all the things you have to do on a regular basis to make your life work. Your shopping, your cooking, your cleaning, your driving, doing your tax returns, taking care of your family, and so on. Now, if you can just copy me with doing this exercise, let's imagine that this sheet of paper, hold it in your hand, grasp it tightly on both sort of sides, and, like, really grasp it. Imagine that these are all those difficult thoughts and feelings and emotion and memories that you'd like to get rid of. Now hold it tightly on the edges and then push it as far away as you can with your arms. Okay, push it as far away as you possibly can. And hold that piece of paper tightly with both your hands, stretching your arms out, pushing that paper far away as possible. Because this is what culturally we're told to do, right? Get these thoughts and feelings away from you. Friends tell you to do this, doctors can tell you to do this, counselors, magazines, self-help books, you know, do what you can to get rid of these difficult thoughts and feelings. But hey, looks like you're not trying hard enough. I want you to, like, really push those thoughts and feelings away, push as hard as you possibly can, straining your elbows, dislocating your shoulders even, to try to get these thoughts and feelings away from you. And as you now notice how tiring this is. We've only been doing this for less than a minute and already it's tiring. And imagine doing this all day, every day. How much energy does it consume? And notice how distracting it is. If the person you love were right in front of you, would you be able to hug them? Could you give your full attention to any one thing? If your favorite movie was playing right now, you know, how much would you miss out on? I guess if you held it up high enough, you could maintain it, but really, you know, it's really kind of blocks. If it's right in front of you, it kind of blocks your field of vision. So now I'm just going to invite you to just notice and put that piece of paper on your lap. Okay, now shake out your hands. You're free to use your hands for what you want. You're free to do the things that you need to do. You know, before we're distracted and missing out on life. You know, we're exhausted. It's hard to focus. It's so hard to do the things that make life work. So much, how much more energy do we have now? How much easier it is to engage and focus on what's really important to you. Now you can hug, now you can cook, now you can drive a car, right? So notice that the paper representing all those difficult thoughts and feelings hasn't disappeared. It's not that we got them and moved them away. They're still here. but we've got a new way of responding to them or handling them differently. They're no longer holding us back or bringing us down or jerking us around. And if there's something useful we can do with them, yes, we can do it. Because even those painful thoughts and feelings have value to them. They point us to something that we care about. If they somewhere embedded and sometimes in those difficult thoughts and feelings are values that we have. The co-founder of ACT, I love what he says, we hurt because we care. So embedded in the things that we hurt are things that we really truly value. But if we're so busy using all the energy to keep them at bay, we really can't do the committed, valued actions that we want. So that's just a little experiential feeling of ACT, of what's the difference between society and other people's messages of like difficult thoughts and feelings are to be handled versus just coexisting with them and knowing, yeah, they're there, but now I have the ability to choose. And if there's nothing we can do about them at all, we can just let them sit there alongside us.
Thanks, Lee. Okay, so now I'm going to share a little bit about some of the things we're learning from caregivers and clinicians who have been co-facilitating this ACT intervention together in partnership. Let me go back to sharing my screen. So the next few slides are going to show some results. And this is a survey we conducted among caregivers and clinicians who had co-facilitated an ACT workshop together to caregivers of people with neurodevelopmental disabilities. And the survey asked some questions about their experience co-facilitating and implementing the ACT workshop. So I'll share a bit about some of the themes that came out of that survey. One of the really big themes, and I think this points to one of the highlights of this intervention, is the key ingredients of those successful partnerships, those caregiver-clinician partnerships. And in the kind of greeny blue tiles up there, there's a couple of words and sort of sub things that came out of there. And so facilitators spoke about communication, not only around planning the workshop as a team, but also around communicating with each other when looking for support when co-facilitating a workshop. And Lee and I know about this a lot. We've co-facilitated many workshops together, and just how important that communication is as a team, to feel like you can really count on one another, to be able to lean on and trust your co-facilitator, and to know you can do that. And that can really lead to sort of less anxiety and stress when you're co-facilitating a workshop. And I think one of the really great things about these caregiver and clinician partnerships is that you can kind of count on your co-facilitator for different things and the different skill sets that they bring to that dyad and that partnership. You come to rely on each other for those different pieces and perspectives that you bring. Time is a really important part of developing those successful partnerships. Time to prepare for the workshop, to debrief after the workshop sessions, and that takes time, I think, to develop those really successful partnerships. And participants can feel that when you're a team that's really had time to come together, and you as facilitators really feel that too. And I think in establishing kind of that rapport, you start to understand each other's communication and feedback styles. You have time to practice together. All of those things that are really important, I think, to a successful partnership, and certainly came out in our survey results. And then flexibility was another thing that participants spoke about. So flexibility when facilitating. So of course, there's this manual, this beautiful manual we created that outlines the exercises really, really nicely, but also with ACT and with any kind of, intervention, you have to think on your toes, right? You're not sure what people are going to share, what kind of questions are going to come up. So having that flexibility as a team, as a partnership, to know that you can bring in your own kind of approach and style and experience, and adapt accordingly. And there are, I think, some really, really nice quotes on the slide that came out of our survey as well. Complementary perspectives. I think we've spoke a bit about this already, but I think this is really at the heart of the caregiver-clinician partnership, and at the heart of this model. So the workshop participants definitely identified that having both a caregiver and a clinician present facilitating together was crucial to the facilitation experience. And we heard that from workshop participants, but also from the facilitators. And that there were unique skills and perspectives that each facilitator brought to the team, and how that really sort of enhanced the group dynamic. In particular, I think the lived experience of caregivers is really crucial to creating that kind of connection with the workshop participants, and creating that group cohesion and the trust amongst the group, and the vulnerability and sharing that happens as part of these workshops. And then from the clinician side, I think the clinician's sort of knowledge and experience of group processes, and if a crisis or a sort of situation that will require something where a clinical sort of lens was needed, I think there was comfort felt in that as well, knowing that there was someone with that training to kind of be able to address those issues that they came up. So yeah, the lived experience, the unique skills and perspectives, the clinical training, and then I think there are some really lovely quotes on there that highlight how each is so essential to this partnership. And you really need both, and that's like at the heart of this work. Challenges of facilitating. So we'll speak a little bit about the challenges and then the benefits as well. I think this came out for both caregiver and clinician facilitators, that there's a real emotional cost to running these kinds of workshops that's different from other kinds of interventions. And I can certainly speak to that from my own clinical training. I've never really facilitated a workshop where you as a facilitator are also involved in a lot of sharing and vulnerability. And that's different than maybe what we're sort of traditionally, I don't know, trained to do in some ways. And that comes at its own kind of emotional cost. But I think particularly for caregiver facilitators as well, there is a load that you take on when you're absorbing the sharing of the group members, and also your own sharing and vulnerability. And that definitely is something that you take on as a facilitator. There's a pretty considerable time in facilitating the workshops themselves, but I think as we sort of spoke to, preparing and practicing is really important as a team leading up to your workshop, debriefing as a team. And yeah, I think there's maybe more so than you might see in some other kinds of interventions where you might just take a training and then go right into delivering something. That time spent together and practicing and preparing is really, really important. Caregivers in particular noted that there was sometimes a strain that co-facilitating had in their life and in their relationships, because they may have had less time to spend with their loved ones, with their family and friends. And I think it's important to think about that in terms of the capacity of caregiver or clinician facilitators. Things come up in life, right? And you suddenly may not be able to facilitate something you thought you were going to be able to do. So knowing that there's a team of other people that can support you, can somebody else step in, and just being cognizant of that, and that sort of capacity building piece. And then the last little square there on the slide around compensation. And I think we'll see more of this as we hopefully move to more of these kinds of partnered interventions, is really the importance of compensation for both roles. That caregivers should be paid for their time to train, to facilitate, to participate in debriefing, practicing back in the times of in-person workshops, traveling, all of those kinds of things, and that those roles need to be really valued, and that there needs to be a commitment. And we've encountered challenges in this along the way with some of the teams we've trained with, like on the part of the agency, whoever's offering the workshop, that those roles are valued and paid for and honored. Okay, very quickly, I'm realizing we're 8:02. Okay, benefits of, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, sorry, let me just go back really quickly. Benefits of facilitating. I think we've talked a little bit about this, but I think that we heard this from our facilitators, that there really is a feeling of empowerment when you are able to provide this kind of support to caregivers, both from the perspective of clinicians and caregivers. That they're feeling more confident in their skills and their ability to apply ACT to their life, and that sort of engaging in the ACT material allowed them to apply ACT principles better, in their own life, whether that was, professional or personal. Sorry, I keep going from my one screen to my other screen. Okay, and that there's a real feeling of contribution to other caregivers. And that sort of feeling, a connection of feeling less alone in your own caregiving experience, but also in feeling connected to your workshop participants. Sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of water. Lee, I don't know if you want to quickly chime in on anything here. Just give me one moment.
Joanne, I'll let your throat. Just, I guess, just being aware of the time. I think the caregivers and clinicians, as you said, both benefit in different ways, and complementary ways to one another. And it's just in closing for me, to have attended a workshop and then be asked to learn how to co-facilitate with these caring professionals was just an incredible experience. And now I've done, I think, 23 workshops, and it's just amazing to, like, my own personal sense of growth has grown, not only from the ACT exercises, but that my opinions and my lived experience was valued so much, and to see it resonating in other people's, other caregivers' faces, that it was like an automatic shorthand, that they knew that when I was asking them to do one of these very experiential, vulnerable exercises, because ACT is all experiential. After we explain it, we dive right into every process is lived out with a unique but vulnerable exercise, that I won't ask them to do something I'm not willing to do myself first. So we model that vulnerability ourselves, whether we're a clinician or a caregiver. I think that's really unique. And so we're not, so I could go on and on about the uniqueness of ACT, and I'm aware that our time is up, Joanna, but like for me, I have to say that it's probably the single greatest intervention that's been helpful to me, but this being able to impart this to other caregivers and increase their well-being has really such a blessing, but also partnering with clinicians that are willing to really honor my lived experience and partner with me and co-develop this intervention and really hear us is, I think, highly unusual to the extent that the involvement that caregivers are in this intervention, whether it be parents or siblings or, and of different communities. So I think, Joanna, I just kind of wound it up for us because I'm aware that we've gone after 8 o'clock.
I think you summed it up perfectly, Lee. I'm going to put up our emails and our ACT for Caregivers website. But yeah, I think we hope that this kind of model expands to other kinds of interventions, because I think it's really, really, really wonderful and special. And I really do believe that it's the way to go to make things more meaningful and successful. And it's absolutely been the highlight of the work I get to do. So thank you for listening. Sorry we went over time, but we're happy to stay on and chat.
Not a worry, you two. Thank you so much for everything that you have shared with us this evening. This was fantastic.